All right. Hello, everybody. How you all doing today? It is time for this week in supervision, and I am excited to present to you today. I'm trying something a little bit different today, and I'm hoping I can keep up a little bit better. But we're going to get on started. Today, we're going to be talking about when support crosses the line, protecting your license and your client. A big part of supervision is making sure that supervisees are understanding and aware of the liabilities that come with performing practice, right? There are so many different things. Now, these lines can be crossed quite easily. The lines are put in place, number one, to protect the client, okay? But we also, number two, want to make sure that we protect our license as well. And so we had a conversation about some of the things that we need to know about when it's so easy and you all have been around it. You have experienced it, I'm sure, witness individuals crossing the line with clients. And this is a big thing, a major thing that we want to protect against. But we're going to with that in a second. I want to go on and start 540. I want to go on and start with a test question. This is usually how we start off after we discuss case scenarios and things like that. We go into a test question. I'm going to see if I can share my screen with you and see if you know the answer to this test question. And again, this is, as I always mention, a way to get the supervisees engaged. We want to keep them engaged and get them feeling like they're sharp and ready to test when it's time. And so the question, I got this one from Pocket Prep. All right. And the question says, which of the following therapeutic on approaches focuses on the elimination of maladaptive behavior by associating the behavior with a negative stimulus? A, extinction, B, aversion, C, flooding. And I'm not going to lie, when I saw that, I got a little anxious because the research oriented questions are not my top. And I started seeing extinction there, and I was like, but sometimes you got to help your supervisees to understand that, hey, just calm it down a little bit, take a deep breath, take a look at it. It may be something that you actually know. And so what is the answer that you chose here? Extinction, aversion, or flooding? Again, shout out to Pocket Prep, a really good tool for prepping up for supervisees or those who are taking their test, getting prepped up. But the answer for this one is B, aversion. So after we talked about that aversion, after we identified that, we got into a conversation about what aversion is. What is aversion therapy is what we talked about. What does that look like? And we gave multiple examples of what aversion looks like. Now, if I were to ask you, what does aversion therapy look like? What are some common examples of that being put into practice? And so we'll say, put that in the chat. Give me an example of aversion therapy. And one that comes to mind really quickly is this one right here. Okay, substance use. Substance use. When we're talking about substance use, and the idea is when you are involved with aversion therapy, you may have someone, a good example would be, say, we have a behavior, which is alcohol use. Okay. And a person maybe has alcohol use disorder. And what we're doing is, in a sense, pairing that behavior with a negative stimulus, in this case, antabuse. That's what we question our supervisees about. Have you heard of antabuse? What is that used for? What's some examples of that? We gave them opportunities to discuss examples of antabuse. And what was being discussed by one of my supervisees is that, hey, when I've seen this at its best, it's when a client decides that I have to have this in order to pretty much survive. Okay, in order, because what happens with antabuse, and what I did was, a lot of the supervisees weren't very familiar with antabuse and how it works. And so what we did was played a quick video. Okay. We played a quick video, and I'm gonna share the video. I'm gonna try to share the video with you right now. And it's just, and this again keeps the group engaged, keeps them involved, keeps them interested in the whole topics that you're talking about, and anything that you can use to help to seal it into the mind of the supervisee, seal concepts into the mind of the supervisee is really important to get that working. Okay. And so we're just going to show this quick clip about antabuse. It's a minute.
I had a patient who went to a restaurant in South Philly,
Oh man, I hope that's, let me
and
start that over. I don't know if that's playing. Let me stop that. Let me share again. I was doing good. Here we go. Yeah, I did have the sound. Okay. All right, let's go. Let's go.
ate the pasta marinara sauce without it had alcohol in it. He got really sick. Antabuse. So antabuse is my least favorite of the three that I'm going to talk about for alcohol. It can be pretty dramatic. The if a patient drinks on it, they will get the beginning symptoms would be like flushing, sweating, elevated heart rate, elevated blood pressure, and then vomiting that can be significant. I had a patient who went to a restaurant in South Philly and ate the pasta marinara sauce without it had alcohol in it. He got really sick. It's been around for a long time. It was approved in the 50s. I find the background story of antabuse to be really fascinating, and you don't need it, but it was developed by Danish scientists in the 30s who were doing studies on parasites, and one of them ingested it, went to a party 3 days later, and got really sick when he had a drink. And basically, what they found was that it is not effective for parasites, but very effective for alcohol. I just find that interesting. So 20 years later, approved in the U.S. for
Interesting, interesting. So we got the sum of what antabuse is, and it's something that has to be taken to help to prevent from someone from having alcohol use issues. And so when they ingest it, of course, it becomes toxic in their body and makes it almost impossible for them to continue to drink at that time as long as they're on that. So, and then we talked about some other examples of aversion therapy and aversion interventions. Like if you had someone, a client that was biting their nails, and this doesn't work for everybody. Sometimes they work, sometimes they don't. But if they're biting their nails and it's getting to the point they're bleeding and they just have a nervous condition. Now, I've seen some people bite their way through it regardless of the intervention, but an intervention might be something, a special whatever that you find that's for that, like a fingernail polish that has a really bad taste that's not going to kill them if they lick it. And that will develop an aversion for them to bite their nails. And it may be enough to stop that impulse. I don't want to get too deep in that, but that impulse we know many times is an anxiety impulse and is many times unconscious. So we talked about that. And then we got into another situation. We're going to bring this up. We got into another situation, a scenario here. And we have a client here, and we got this from HIP HPSO, I believe they give some cases, and I wanted to credit them for this case. This is not original. Okay, so, and I mixed it up a little bit though. The insured in this case is a licensed mental health counselor. Okay, I should have just changed that to licensed social worker with 3 years of experience. The counselor had recently begun working as a solo practitioner when she started treating a client, a woman that was in her early 20s. So the client's intake form stated that she was seeking therapy for her borderline personality disorder, and the counselor's treatment plan for her included dialectical behavior therapy. So if you don't know about that, hopefully we'll talk about that before the end. During the initial session, the counselor learned that the client was also in recovery for eating disorder, anorexia, and she had a history of depression that was being managed by her by medication. As a part of the counselor's treatment plan for the client's borderline or BD borderline personality disorder, that included DBT. The counselor gave the client her cell phone number. And so I asked the client, asked my supervisees the question. When I ask you the question, is it appropriate for a therapist to give a client their cell phone number? Really quickly, we have to just go through this. Another question might be, is that a personal cell phone number or is that a work cell phone number? Okay. And so that's what we talked about. And if you look at this, I asked them to study what's here. What are some things that might come to mind that this client might be experiencing? Okay. What is it that comes to mind that might be troublesome for the client? What might come to mind, things that we might want to avoid or be aware that might occur in the interaction with this client? What type of treatment is this client receiving? Now, when we look at the treatment, we notice that there is DBT is being used. What is DBT? Okay. DBT is dialectical behavioral therapy. And we know that this therapy is generally used to treat what we may get back into that, right? But borderline personality disorder, DBT is used for that. Okay, it was designed for that. It's something else, but hopefully we'll come back to that. But we talked about this. Now, the thing is when someone receives DBT, often when it's when DBT is given at its fullest, okay, the way that the developer intended it for it to be, because I'm gonna give the answer away. The way the developer intended for it to be, when it's at its fullest, it does sometimes involve phone communication, okay, when the person is away from therapy. And that could involve a therapist. So, in that situation, it may be appropriate somewhat for them to have access to the work cell phone. But that's not at all what was happening in this case, in this situation. Okay. Other things to look at. Okay, so when I was mentioning some things that we want to keep at the top of mind concerning this client, we want to know if the client has abandonment issues, anger, impulse control, potential sexual abuse, complicated relationships. These are all going to be common characteristics that might exist with someone who has this description of diagnosis, but we don't want to assume anything, right? History of emotional abuse. We want to check to see if that's present. A need to control. They're often feeling powerlessness. Okay. Perfectionism. Shame-based identity. We want to check for that, right? We want to check for critical caregivers. Maybe their parents were very critical or potential self-harm. Okay. Just really quickly, potential sexual abuse. This is a big one. Why? Not just because, oh, somebody was sexually abused, whatever. No, if someone has been sexually abused, there are certain things that we want to keep in mind when we're approaching therapy. And this can't be discounted because studies are showing that there's a direct correlation with sexual abuse and suicidality. Okay, so that's a major safety concern that we want to be aware of if it exists. But not only is it a high probability that sexual abuse might have occurred with borderline personality disorder, the stats are pretty high, but we have eating disorder as well. And so these are things we want to rule out that, of course, as I talk about all the time, we can rule out if we ace them. Okay, if we ace our client, but also look at this compelling statistics. I haven't fact checked it, but it says Psychology Today. It says sexual abuse and the development of anorexia. Correlation they're suggesting between 30 to 65% of individuals with anorexia have a history of childhood sexual abuse. This reminds me, and I don't want to get too off track here, y'all. But this just reminds me. I don't know if y'all have been following Netflix, and I'm trying to figure out a way I can try to case this one. But people will have to go and watch. But I don't know if y'all been watching this one. This is a good one to profile if you haven't already taken a look. One of my supervisees put me onto this too, directed me. But this is the high school catfish. This is a Netflix special, okay? And it's basically what I'm saying, anorexia, suicidality, if you're to assess it for yourself at the end. See, all this is not going to be given to you. But if you were to assess things at the end, what really happened with the person who was causing all the trouble? Was there potential sexual abuse? Did that cause it? Where was there self-hate towards their body? Like it's major things that we need to know in order to be able to resolve problems that other people won't be able to resolve. I have that data, so I might have additional insights to that particular case because I know what happens with someone who has anorexic behaviors sometimes. Okay. And I better move on. I better move on. Okay. Ooh that 44 50. Okay. So we talked about that. All right. And we talked about the rest of this case. So typically in DBT, telephonic consultations between a counselor and their client may be allowed. Okay. And so the client may receive in the moment guidance that can help them to apply those skills and things like that. But that's very different. In this case, what was being encouraged was the client can text her at any time. There has to be a boundary. And this is not a thing for us to be friends. But with this particular person, they became friends. They were socializing, exercising together, having exchange of pet names and things like that. She even told her client she loved her. How dare she tell her client that she loved her? Are we supposed to tell our clients we love them? I'm taking this really lightly, but it's not light. I'm not telling you you can't tell your client that you love them because some of us, we just love everybody, right? But there is a fine line between this because sometimes clients don't understand how to interpret that, especially a client that potentially could have symptoms of splitting, symptoms of changing from idealization where they love you to a sudden switch to devaluation, to has major self-esteem concerns by the nature of anorexia. We might want to be careful with that. Anyway, long story short, the client, their father passed away. Okay. Then she began to withdraw and missed appointments. Okay. She stopped taking her antidepressants. Okay. She became frustrated because the counselor was frustrated. The counselor sent discouraging texts and said to the client, I can't help you if you won't help yourself. Now, have you ever told a client that? I mean, that might be something that's said, but you need to be careful based on your client, what they can handle. Okay. And shortly after this, the client fainted from not eating, crashed her car, and was hospitalized. But guess what? The mother discovered the inappropriate volume of text from the counselor. Okay. And this led to a licensing board complaint. That's the last thing that we want. And most boards work with you, but when you do certain things that are certainly clear that you cross the line, there are consequences, okay? So here we're seeing, as far as in social work, this is defined as a dual relationship. Okay, but what is a dual relationship? Because we talked to the supervisees about that. What is a dual relationship? That needs to be defined because some of your supervisees will not be aware of that. I had one supervisee that was having a relationship outside of the counseling relationship. The counseling relationship had ended and they were out having frequent visits or visits, dates. Maybe it wasn't a date. They were meeting with the client afterwards and they did not know. They just didn't know. That's why we're here, that this was inappropriate. Because for some people, the sound of dual relationship means there's two relationships happening at one time. But let's look at what the book says. Okay. The book, the NASW Code of Ethics book, says in 1.0, what's a dual relationship? A dual relationship is dual or multiple relationships occurring when social workers relate to clients in more than one relationship, whether it's professional, social, or business. We're not supposed to do it. Dual or multi. Here we go. Dual or multiple. Maybe we should call it multiple relationships. That should be highlighted. Dual or multiple relationships can occur, guess what? Simultaneously or consecutively. So that means if it's consecutively, that means one may have seemed to end. I'm no longer counseling them, but if I start having a relationship and we're going out to eat and doing things like that, it's still considered a dual relationship according to the code of ethics. We can get stripped of our license for violating this code. So one of the things I went through because we were talking about Marsha and it wasn't in a certain order. I think I would have done that faster than this, but I just gave the freaking answer away. But which individual is credited as the founder of DBT? You already had an answer. I just couldn't help but help you. But DBT, but you know what? That's the answer. But how about this? Because they thought they were getting off with this. How about Aaron Beck? Because that could pop up on an exam. Aaron Beck, I just don't feel like he gets his credit because we talk about his therapies all the time. How many of y'all know What Aaron Beck is recognized for? Well, he's the founder and developer of cognitive therapy, later to become CBT, cognitive behavioral therapy. Well, what about Carl Rogers? It's a beautiful day in the neighborhood, a beautiful day for a neighbor. Some of you all were alive long enough to know about Mr. Rogers. And the reason why I start singing about Mr. Rogers, who is not Carl Rogers, but Mr. Rogers, for those of us who could remember that, I just say, hey, we could remember what Carl Rogers, what his philosophies were by looking at Mr. Rogers, imagining him taking his shoes off and doing the beautiful thing in the neighborhood, whole thing, right? And there's a client in front of him. That would be client centered therapy. That probably won't work for a lot of people. It works for me. Okay. Client centered therapy. Carl Rogers. And then we have B.F. Skinner. We can't leave him out. What was he known for? Operant. Okay. Operant conditioning, things of that nature. And on the flip side of that was what? Classical conditioning. In classical conditioning, who was known for classical conditioning, most known for that, that would be Pavlo with the dogs, right? All right. So these are some things we got to end it here. These are some things that we went over, and you see how it's kind of a comprehensive. It was a little bit better flow than what I'm giving you, but we're covering ethics. We're learning how to keep our license. We're learning how to provide for the safety of our clients. We're learning about theory and practice. We're learning about not just theory and practice, but we're learning about how to diagnose uh and things of that nature. Now, I just see that I probably was not sharing my screen, but that's okay. I think that you all got it. But I'm going to share my screen one more time. I always, it's live, man. It is what it is. I'm sorry, y'all. Okay, so let's go on and share the screen. I want to let you all know that we do have a free training coming up on the 16th, and it's called the ABCs of Self-Care for Caregivers. We're excited about that. Come and join us at 5:30 p.m. to 6:30. That will be presented by Latasha. Latasha, blacked out on her name, Henry. Okay, Latasha Tony. Woo, I was about to mess that up. Next, we have the DSM-5 TR Disrupted. This is an online, on-demand training. We thank you all who've been sending positive comments about it. That really helps us a lot. We've been getting a lot of positive feedback. This is a new one. We just released this not even a month ago. For those of y'all who need the DSM-5, have the LICSW, and need the required DSM-5 training, you can get that from us. Okay. And then we have the supervisor training coming up November. Come check us out. Let's go on and end it here. Y'all have a great weekend. I'm glad I got this live in. I hope this is helping. We got some new things on the way. Pray that I'll be able to get it done. That I think is going to help a lot of people in the group. And we'll talk about that soon. Y'all take care now. All right. Bye bye.